The winds were colder than usual beyond the wall. Even Ghost, Jon Snow's loyal direwolf, kept closer than normal, his breath misting in the freezing air. It wasn't supposed to happen this way. They weren't supposed to be here so early. But Daenerys, Jon, and Ser Jorah had all agreed they couldn't wait for Cersei's lies or the politics of Westeros. The real war was in the north, and they had to face it now. It all started when Jon returned from Dragonstone, having bent the knee to Daenerys. They had felt a strong connection, something more than just alliance. When word came from Tormund that the Night King was moving faster than anyone expected, Jon didn't hesitate. He convinced Daenerys to come with him, and Ser Jorah, always by her side, had refused to stay behind. "I trust your instincts," Daenerys had told Jon, her silver hair catching the firelight of Dragonstone. "If the threat is near, we face it together." They traveled north with only a small company Tormund, Beric Dondarrion, a few trusted soldiers, and the dragons, Drogon, and Rhaegal. It was a risky move. Winterfell wasn't prepared for war, and the northern lords still questioned Daenerys' presence. But when they saw the dragons flying above, even the doubters fell silent. Sansa Stark met them at the gates of Winterfell. Her eyes, cold and calculating, didn't hide her unease. She greeted Jon with a stiff hug, barely acknowledging Daenerys. "You've come too soon," she whispered later that night. "We're not ready. There's no more time," Jon replied. "If the Night King crosses the wall, it won't matter who sits on the Iron Throne." Arya watched Daenerys with interest. She didn't trust easily, especially anyone who called themselves queen. But she also didn't speak against her, not yet. That night, they held a war council. Maps were laid out, strategies whispered over candlelight. Bran Stark, now the three-eyed raven, shared visions of the dead moving fast and without rest. "They're not just walking south," he said in his quiet, distant voice. "They're hunting." Daenerys listened carefully, her face hard. "Then we go to them," she said, her voice firm. "We take the fight beyond the wall. We burn them before they reach the living." Jon looked at her, surprised. "It's not safe, even with dragons." "I didn't come here to hide behind walls," she interrupted. "I came to save the realm. If the enemy is in the north, then that's where I'll be." Jorah stood beside her, silent but proud. He had watched her grow from a scared girl to a powerful queen. He would follow her into fire, ice, or death itself. By morning, the small group had prepared. Sansa protested, begging Jon to stay and help defend Winterfell, but he wouldn't listen. "This isn't about defending castles," he told her. "It's about stopping death before it spreads." And so they rode out. Rhaegal and Drogon soared above, their wings casting shadows over the snow. The group moved fast, cutting through the icy lands with urgency. Tormund led them through secret paths, places only wildlings knew. It was eerily quiet in the far north. Even the wind seemed afraid. As they moved deeper into the wilderness, signs began to show: frozen corpses, shattered bones, blackened ground where the dead had walked. Jon felt the heaviness in the air, like something was watching. Ghost growled often, pacing ahead restlessly. Every night they set camp with fear that it might be their last. On the fifth day, they saw them. A wall of white, a mass of death moving like one great wave. The Night King was at the center, riding a dead horse, his blue eyes glowing with cruel calm. Daenerys' breath caught. She had seen war, fire, and betrayal, but nothing prepared her for this. "They're coming," Jorah whispered. "We have to strike now." Jon looked to her. She nodded. "Then let's burn them all." Drogon and Rhaegal let out deafening roars as they flew into the air, snow whipping around them. The ground trembled beneath their wings. Daenerys climbed onto Drogon's back, her heart pounding not from fear, but from the weight of what was coming. Jon stood beside Rhaegal, hesitating for just a moment before mounting. He had never flown into battle before, But there was no time to think. Below them, the army of the dead stretched as far as the eye could see. Thousands upon thousands of corpses, moving without rest, without fear. The Night King raised his hand, as if mocking their arrival, daring them to try. Dracarys! Daenerys screamed, her voice carried by the winds. Drogon obeyed, unleashing a river of fire upon the whites. The flames spread like a wave, melting snow, cracking ice, and turning dozens of undead into ash. Rhaegal followed, roaring as he lit up the frozen landscape with green flame. The fire tore through the ranks of the dead, but it wasn't enough. More just kept coming. Jon flew closer, trying to reach the Night King, but the ancient creature simply raised another wave of frost. A massive icy storm shot into the sky, striking Rhaegal mid-flight. The dragon screamed, wings flailing, and Jon barely held on as they tumbled to the ground. They crashed hard into the snow, sliding across the frozen earth. Jon rolled off, coughing, blood at the corner of his mouth. Rhaegal was injured but alive, growling as he struggled to rise. Daenerys saw the fall and screamed Jon's name. She swooped down on Drogon, fire still bursting from his mouth, but the cold was too strong now. The blizzard summoned by the Night King was unnatural, blinding. Even Drogon faltered. On the ground, the rest of the group was already fighting. Tormund swung his axe, laughing madly even as the dead swarmed him. "Come on, you frozen bastards," he roared, hacking through limbs and skulls. Beric's flaming sword sliced through whites like butter, his face grim. "We need to retreat," he shouted. "There are too many." But Jorah didn't retreat. He was fighting beside Daenerys' soldiers, pushing through the horde, trying to get closer to Jon. "We hold the line," he yelled. "Buy them time." Jon rose shakily, grabbing Longclaw. Ghost was at his side, blood on his white fur. The direwolf was already injured, limping, but refused to back down. Together, they charged toward the Night King, cutting down anything in their path. And then Jon saw him clear, ahead of the horde. The Night King stood still, waiting, calm as death. Jon's heart pounded. This was the moment. He ran faster, ignoring the pain in his body. Their eyes locked. The Night King smiled cold, cruel. Then something moved behind him. Another dragon? Undead Viserion, his flesh rotting, his wings torn, but still full of unnatural power. He roared, blue fire bursting from his mouth. It hit the ground with a thunderous blast, separating Jon from the Night King. Daenerys flew in from the other side, screaming again, this time in rage. She saw what had become of her child Viserion, turned into a weapon of death. Her heart broke all over again. She directed Drogon toward Viserion, and the two dragons clashed mid-air, fire and ice colliding above the battlefield. It was chaos. Fire rained from the sky. Ice spears exploded from the ground. Men screamed. The dead clawed at anything that moved. Jon tried to get back on Rhaegal, who was limping toward him, bleeding from one wing. Just as he reached him, a spear of ice struck the dragon's leg. Rhaegal roared in pain, but didn't fall. Jorah reached Daenerys on the ground as Drogon landed. She was pale, her face covered in snow and ash. "We have to go," he said, grabbing her arm. "We can't win here." "No," she whispered. "We came to end this." "We'll die if we stay," he said, almost pleading. Jon ran to them, bloodied and wild-eyed. "We have to fall back." "We weren't ready for this." Daenerys looked at Jon, then at the battlefield. She saw her people dying, her dragons bleeding, and the Night King standing untouched in the distance. Her fists clenched. Her fury was deep, but she nodded. They climbed on Drogon together, Jorah behind her. Jon turned to Rhaegal, who limped beside them. The dragons took to the sky again, but not in victory. They flew southbroken, desperate and unsure of what to do next. As they disappeared into the clouds, The Night King watched silently, his expression unchanged. This battle was only the beginning. The cold air bit at their faces as Drogon and Rhaegal flew through the night sky, wounded and exhausted. Below them, the land was empty and frozen, a silent grave for those they had left behind. No one spoke on the flight back. Daenerys held tightly to Drogon, her silver hair tangled and wet from snow and blood. Jon flew beside her, barely holding on as Rhaegal struggled to stay aloft, each wingbeat slower than the last. When they landed near the watchtower at Eastwatch by the Sea, it was almost dawn. The light barely touched the horizon, as if even the sun feared to rise. The few men left guarding the wall rushed out in shock when they saw the dragons limping in, their bodies torn, their flames weakened. Jon slid off Rhaegal and nearly collapsed. His knees buckled, and only Ghost pressing against him kept him from falling completely. His face was pale, lips cracked. Daenerys jumped down from Drogon and ran to him, grabbing his arm. "You're bleeding," she whispered. "So are you," he replied, forcing a bitter smile. They were alive, but only barely. Jorah helped Daenerys to the keep, his eyes scanning the sky behind them. "He didn't follow," he said. "He didn't have to," Jon replied. "He let us go." That thought stayed with them all night. They met inside the small hall of Eastwatch. The fire barely warmed the room, and the moon was darker than the shadows. Tormund, Beric, and the few men who survived sat quietly. No one cheered. No one drank. They just stared at the flames, like they might find answers in the flickering light. "He could have finished us," Jon said finally. "Why didn't he?" "Because he wanted us to leave," Beric answered. "He wants us to run. He wants us to bring fear back to the rest of the world." Daenerys sat silently for a long time. Then she stood up, her voice quiet but sharp. "He wants the living to divide. If we go back to Winterfell with this story, no one will believe us. Not until the dead are at their gates." Jorah frowned. "Then we show them." "How?" Tormund asked. "We couldn't even kill one of them." "We burned dozens," but he stood untouched. "And did you see that thing, Viserion? That's not a dragon anymore. That's a nightmare with wings." A heavy silence fell. Jon leaned forward. "We need a new plan. We can't charge into their army again. We fight smart. We find out what he wants. He's not marching for sport. He's coming for something." Bran's words echoed in Jon's mind. "He wants to erase this world. He wants an endless night. What if it's more than that?" Jon said aloud. "What if he's waiting for something? Someone?" Daenerys looked at him. "You think it's me. Maybe. Or you, or Bran. Maybe something we don't even understand." Tormund scoffed. "We're wasting time. If he wants death, we give him fire and steel." "No," Daenerys said suddenly. "We give him fear. If he wants to shake the world, we shake it first. We fly straight to King's Landing." Everyone turned to her. And above them all, flying like a dark god Viserion, his dead wings spreading frost through the sky. Behind it, the Night King watched, not charging, not rushing, just watching. And smiling. Winterfell was about to become the last stand of the living. The first wave hit like a thunderclap. Thousands of whites crashed against the outer wall of Winterfell with unnatural speed, climbing over each other like insects, their hands clawing for stone, flesh, anything living. Arrows rained from the battlements, dozens of flaming projectiles lighting the night sky. Some dead fell, ignited by dragonglass-tipped arrows. But for every one that dropped, 10 more took its place. Jon stood at the front gate, sword drawn, Ghost growling by his side. Longclaw glowed faintly in the moonlight, and when Jon raised it, the northern men followed. "Hold the line," he shouted. "No matter what comes through those gates, we stand." Tormund and Brienne anchored the shield wall. Gendry fought beside Arya, swinging his warhammer with wild strength. Sam, shaking but refusing to run, stabbed at anything that got too close, his face soaked with fear and sweat. Above them, Daenerys rode Drogon in a circle of fire. She unleashed torrents of dragon flame into the army of the dead, burning hundreds at once, but she was careful too careful. She didn't dare fire too close to the castle walls, not with her own people fighting below. Rhaegal, still injured, flew lower. His movements were slower, and that made him vulnerable. From the distance, a screech tore through the air. Viserion, the undead dragon, dove from the clouds like a curse, his blue fire slicing across the battlements. The explosion of frost shattered part of the upper wall, sending men flying. Arya ducked just in time, her ears ringing from the blast. Sansa, watching from the crypts below, heard the roar and felt the stone ceiling tremble. The people hiding underground began to panic. Bran remained beneath the weirwood tree, alone except for Theon and a small group of Ironborn guarding him. His face was blank, eyes white. He was searching the past, the present, and something beyond. Jon saw Viserion turning mid-air, heading back for another attack. "Dany!" he screamed. But she was already moving. Drogon met Viserion in the sky with a burst of flame. The two dragons collided mid-air, claws slashing, teeth tearing. It was a horrifying sight. Two brothers, once born of fire, now one reborn in death. Their roars echoed for miles. On the ground, the shield wall was breaking. A giant wight smashed through the front lines, swinging the body of a dead soldier like a weapon. Brienne was thrown to the side, her armor dented. Tormund leapt onto the giant's back, stabbing at its skull with a dragonglass axe, roaring like a beast himself. Behind them, a second line tried to hold. Jon fought like a man possessed, cutting down the dead as fast as they came. But he couldn't stop them all. No one could. And then came the worst sound yet, a long, cold horn. From inside Winterfell, the crypts, Jon turned sharply. No. Below the castle, something was moving. The dead in the crypts, the ones buried, forgotten, decomposed, were rising. Sansa, still hiding with Tyrion and Varys, heard the distant cracking of stone coffins, then screams. Bones and half-rotten corpses clawed out of the tombs, animated by the Night King's dark magic. The dead Stark's generations of them had become part of his army. Tyrion grabbed a dagger, his face pale. "I always said the North was cursed." Sansa pulled a blade from her sleeve, her hands shaking. "We have to fight." They turned to face the undead in the dark. Back on the surface, Daenerys saw Rhaegal falling. Viserion had torn into his side again, and this time the wounded dragon could no longer hold flight. He slammed into the earth just outside the gates, skidding across ice and dirt. Daenerys screamed, circling back to help, but Drogon was hit by a frost blast mid-flight. The flame in his chest faltered. He dipped dangerously low. Jorah saw her falling. Without hesitation, he ran across the battlefield, hacking through wights just to reach her. Daenerys landed hard, tumbling from Drogon's back into the snow. The undead surged toward her. Jorah reached her in time, slashing through the wights with brutal fury. He fought like a man who had already accepted death, shielding her body with his own, taking blows that would have killed a lesser man. And still, the dead came. Jon turned, eyes scanning for Daenerys. He saw her trapped, surrounded, and he ran. But there were too many between them. Arya had vanished into the shadows. Bran was still sitting under the tree, his mind wandering the realm of time, unaware that the Night King himself had entered the Godswood. And behind him, Theon was the last defense. Winterfell was falling. Hope was dying, and the Night King had finally come to finish what he started. The Godswood was silent, save for the crunch of ice beneath slow, steady footsteps. Snow drifted like ash through the weirwood branches as the Night King entered, alone, calm as ever. His blue eyes fixed on one thing, Bran Stark, still seated beneath the ancient tree, eyes lost in another world. Theon stood between them, breathing heavily, his spear shaking in his hands. His men were all dead. The path was clear. Death had come, and it wore a crown of ice. The Night King didn't speak. He didn't need to. The cold rolled off him in waves, and Theon could barely stand. "I'm sorry for everything," Theon whispered over his shoulder to Bran. Bran blinked, returning to himself for a brief moment. "You're a good man, Theon." It was all he needed to hear. Theon charged. A final cry tore from his throat as he rushed forward, dragonglass spear raised. The Night King didn't move until the last second. Then he snapped the spear in half and drove the broken shaft clean through Theon's chest. The Ironburn fell without a word, eyes wide, finally at peace. Bran stared up as the Night King approached, silent and unhurried. The end was here. But then a gust of wind, a blur of motion, and from the shadows Arya Stark leapt through the cold mist, cat-quiet and deadly. Her face was pale, her eyes focused like ice. She came from behind, flying through the air with her dagger raised. The Night King turned just in time. He grabbed her by the throat mid-air. Everything froze. Bran watched, unmoving. Arya's eyes widened. Her breath caught. Then, in one fluid motion, she dropped the dagger from one hand into the other, just like she had trained, and drove the Valyrian steel deep into his heart. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then he shattered. The Night King exploded into a million shards of ice, his body unraveling into frozen dust. All at once, across the battlefield, the whites stopped moving. The giants collapsed. The dead fell like broken puppets. Silence spread. Arya dropped to the ground, gasping, the dagger still smoking in her hand. Bran blinked once, slowly. In the courtyard, Jon stood stunned as the whites around him dropped mid-attack. Ghost panted beside him, confused but alive. Daenerys held Jorah's body, her face stained with tears, as the undead that surrounded them crumbled to dust. He had saved her. With his last breath, he had stood between her and death. She kissed his forehead and whispered, "Thank you, my friend." Tyrion and Sansa crawled out of the crypts, dazed and dirty, as the dead in the tunnels disintegrated. Sansa stumbled into his arms, both too shocked to speak. Jon found Daenerys kneeling beside Jorah, and they locked eyes across the field. It was over. But the cost was beyond measure. Later, they gathered in the great hall. The fires burned low, casting shadows across the stone walls. No one smiled. No one sang. They had won, but it didn't feel like victory. Too many were dead. Brienne stood watch near the door, her armor scratched and bloodied. Sam sat quietly beside Gilly and Little Sam, his hand bandaged. Arya sat alone, cleaning her blade, lost in thought. Bran sat in silence, still seeing things no one else could understand. Jon rose. The Night King is gone. His army is gone. But what we lost tonight, we'll carry forever. Daenerys stood beside him. We faced death together. We fought as one. Let no kingdom, no lord, no queen divide us again. The hall nodded solemn. In the days that followed, they buried their dead. Jorah was laid to rest in the snowy fields beside the weirwood tree, his sword at his side. Theon was buried as a Stark. Rhaegal, though wounded, survived. Drogon stayed close to Daenerys now, never far from her shadow. Jon and Daenerys walked the walls of Winterfell one morning, looking over the snow-covered land. The worst was over. But war was not done. Cersei will come, Daenerys said. She'll take our weakness as a sign to strike. Let her, Jon replied. We faced death. She's just another lie in a crown. Daenerys looked at him for a long moment. And what about us, Jon? What are we now? He didn't answer right away. Then he took her hand. We survived. And for now, that was enough. But far to the south, In the depths of King's Landing, Cersei Lannister stood alone in the throne room, staring at the Iron Throne. She poured herself a glass of wine and whispered, "Let them come. I'll be ready." The Great War had ended, but the Game of Thrones had only just begun. Let Cersei see what's coming. Let the people see us wounded, bloodied, but alive. Let them see the dragons that barely survived. Let them see the Queen and the North kneel together. And if she doesn't believe us, Jorah asked, then we burn her golden throne to the ground, Daenerys said coldly. I won't wait for her lies to poison the realm again. Jon didn't argue. Not this time. He'd seen what the Night King could do. Cersei's games were dust compared to that. They spent 2 days resting. Rhaegal was treated by Daenerys' remaining healers. Drogon barely let anyone touch him. The dragons were quiet, their pride hurt deeper than their wounds. On the third morning, they flew. Over forests turned gray by winter. Over rivers frozen stiff. Over villages already abandoned in fear. People looked up and saw the sky on fire again. But this time, the fire was a warning. When they reached the fields outside King's Landing, they didn't attack. They circled above like storm clouds, and then descended slowly, landing just far enough to avoid open war, but close enough to be seen. Cersei watched from the Red Keep, her lips tight, her eyes filled with rage and something else doubt. "What is this?" she hissed. The mountain stood beside her, silent. Tiborn whispered, "They look wounded, Your Grace." "Perhaps." "Defeated?" "No," Cersei said. "They want something, and they'll get nothing from me." But deep inside, she felt it. The war she thought she could control was no longer hers. Cersei stood in her high chamber, staring down at the smoke rising from the dragon's nostrils as they perched just beyond the walls of King's Landing. They didn't attack. That disturbed her more than fire ever could. This wasn't a show of force. It was a message. "They're bleeding," she muttered, watching Daenerys and Jon walk through the outer field, heads held high, despite the obvious toll of battle. "But they still come here like victors." Qyburn stepped forward, wringing his hands. Perhaps it would be wise to listen. Just for the sake of... Cersei turned, eyes blazing. "I don't listen to threats from crippled queens and bastards in furs. Let them freeze in the north if they want." But she was lying. She had already sent ravens to the Golden Company, ordering more men, more ships. The moment she saw Viserion as a dead dragon, twisted and blue-flamed, she realized this war was no longer about thrones. It was about survival, and she hated being reminded of her mortality. Down below, the gates remained shut. Jon and Daenerys stood before them, flanked only by Jorah, Tormund, and a handful of tired soldiers. The heat from Drogon and Rhaegal kept them warm in the icy wind, but the tension in the air was colder than death itself. "She won't come out," Jorah said. "She will," Daenerys replied. "She always needs to feel in control. She'll want to look me in the eye and pretend she's stronger." And sure enough, the gates creaked open an hour later. The Mountain stepped out first, his monstrous frame towering above the others. Behind him walked Cersei, draped in black and gold, a crown on her head and venom in her smile. "No armies, no banners, just you two?" she said coldly. "How brave. Or how stupid." "We're not here to fight you," Jon said. "We're here to warn you." "Warn me of what? That your dragons can be wounded? That your queen bleeds?" Her gaze shifted to Daenerys. "You look smaller than the stories." Daenerys didn't flinch. "I've seen death. I've burned tyrants. I've freed slaves. But I've never seen what's coming now. No one has. And it will come for you too, no matter how high your walls are." Cersei raised an eyebrow. "So what do you want? An alliance? A truce? Mercy?" "No," Daenerys said. "We want you to get out of the way." Jon stepped forward. "We saw the Night King. We fought him. He has Viserion, now one of her dragons. He raised him from the dead. He's coming to destroy everything, not just the North. Cersei's smile twitched. Dead dragons? Walking corpses? You sound like fools. Or worse, liars. You expect me to abandon my throne because some frozen fairy tale scared the snow out of you? Daenerys took a step closer. You've played your games for long enough. If you stand against us now, you won't just lose your crown, you'll burn with your city. We won't have time to save you when the dead reach your gates. For a moment, the world went still. The wind stopped. Even the dragons were silent. Cersei didn't answer right away. She just stared first at Jon, then at Daenerys. You think this is about the dead, but it's always been about power. And if you think I'll bend the knee to fear, you've already lost. Then she turned her back to them and walked away. The gates slammed shut. Later that night, Daenerys stood on the edge of their camp, staring at the red keep in the distance. Her fists were clenched, knuckles white. Jon walked up beside her, quiet. She won't listen, he said. She never was going to, she replied. She only believes in what she can control. And she can't control this. Jorah joined them, his face grim. Then we return to Winterfell? Jon nodded. Yes, and we prepare. For real this time. They flew at dawn. As the dragons rose into the morning sky, Cersei watched from her tower, drinking wine with a slow, bitter smile. Let them run back to the cold, she whispered. The longer they stay in the north, the weaker they'll become. But far beyond even her gaze, the wall was already broken. The Night King had moved. His army now spilled through the breach like a black river. And behind them, flying high in the burning, cursed sky, was undead Viserion. No one was safe anymore. The skies above the north were darker, now not just with snow, but with dread. Word had arrived before Jon and Daenerys returned to Winterfell. Ravens from Eastwatch stopped coming. Scouts sent beyond the wall never returned, and then Bran Stark saw it. They've crossed, he said coldly. The wall is no longer standing. Eastwatch has fallen. The dead are marching. His words spread through Winterfell like poison. When Jon and Daenerys arrived, they were met with pale faces and trembling voices. Sansa greeted them at the gates, but her expression was hardened by fear and quiet blame. You left Winterfell nearly defenseless, she said flatly. And now the dead are days away. Jon dismounted, weary and soaked in frozen sweat. We thought we could slow them down by time, but we were wrong. They didn't care about battle. They wanted to push us back, make us waste our strength. And now we're surrounded by scared men and farmers holding spears, she snapped. What do we have left? Daenerys stepped forward, eyes sharp. We have dragons, and fire, and enough fury to make them regret ever stepping into the realm of the living. Arya stood behind Sansa, quiet but tense. We've been preparing, she said. The crypts are sealed, the walls reinforced. But if Bran's right, they won't need ladders. They'll just climb over their dead. That night, they gathered in the great hall. Everyone, northern lords, free folk, the Hound, Brienne, Samwell, even Gendry came together. Tormund stood with blood still frozen in his beard, having ridden for 2 days to get ahead of the dead. He carried bad news. There are giants in their army now. Dead ones. I saw them with my own eyes. The Night King rides with Viserion. He flies above them like death itself. The hall was silent. Then Jon stood. We don't run. We don't beg. We fight for every breath, for every child in these walls. If we fall tonight, we fall as one. But if we stand together, we might survive the darkness. Daenerys spoke next. I've lost too many to turn back now. I will not watch this world turn to ice. We burn them. All of them. But beneath her strength, fear lingered. Not fear of the Night King, but of losing everything. Her dragons. Her people, Jon. Later that night, alone in her chambers, Daenerys looked out over the snowy battlements. Rhaegal rested below, wounded but alert. Drogon prowled nearby, his body steaming in the cold. Jorah entered quietly. "Your Grace," he said, "I know you want to lead this fight from the skies, but you should let me ride with Jon. Let me face them first." She turned to him, eyes soft. "You've always protected me, but you can't protect me from this." He bowed his head. "I can try." Meanwhile, Arya and Jon stood together in the courtyard. She handed him a strange weapon, a dragonglass spear she had crafted herself. "You're going to need this," she said. "I thought you didn't believe in heroes," he replied. "I still don't," she said, smirking. "But if one of us is going to make it out alive, it should be you." At the same time, Bran sat beneath the old weirwood tree, his eyes turned white, lost in visions. He saw the army of the dead moving like a tidal wave across the land, absorbing everything. But he saw more. The Night King wasn't just coming for destruction. He was coming for him, and he was close. By morning, snow fell heavier. The wind screamed like 1,000 voices. The horns sounded from the walls, 1, 2, 3 times. The dead had arrived. Jon stood at the front lines, lone claw in hand. Daenerys circled above on Drogon. Rhaegal struggled to fly beside her. Arya stood on the battlements. Brienne led the shield wall. Sam trembled behind the lines, holding a blade he barely knew how to use. And then they saw them first, just shadows in the white. Then shapes. Then death. A sea of corpses, eyes blue, mouths open in silence. Giants, wights,